Good morning, it's Loren Lockman from the Tanglewood Wellness Center, and I've been asked this morning to talk a little bit about why it is that people sometimes fail or fall off the wagon after adopting an optimal diet. What's going on? What is it that makes this difficult for people to do? And I think it's a big topic. We'll see how much we can cover in about 10 minutes or so perhaps, but it's a big area because when we're talking about why people do anything, there are lots of potential reasons. There are lots of things that could be going on. I think there may be a few that are particular to dietary issues and changes that make it particularly difficult. First of all, let's start with the fact that many people may not be. There was a side question before we started, is it about commitment? And I think to a certain extent it might be. One of the first things I say to anybody I'm coaching, and I may have said to many of you when we spoke on the phone or in an email to you, was be clear about what you're committed to. And I said it when you got here too, right? Be clear about what you're committed to creating. Because creating anything that's difficult for you is going to be very difficult to do if you're not fully committed. And I think dietary changes may be more difficult than most because we rely so heavily on food to suppress emotions, to entertain us, to get us through boredom, etc. I think all of which often comes back to suppressing emotions. And so I think one of the biggest reasons that people sometimes fail is maybe they're not fully committed. And I guess a related point is that maybe they, in terms of the emotional work necessary to be willing to deal with the emotions on an ongoing basis as they come up, some people haven't done the work yet, haven't been willing to do the work yet, perhaps, because it can be challenging. It's new, scary ground for most of us. So until we're willing to really face those suppressed emotions, it's going to be very difficult to give up all the substances that have successfully allowed us to not have to feel those things through our entire lives up until now. And I think that may be the single most difficult, challenging aspect of it for most people, is they no longer have this single most powerful crutch that they've ever had. Without it, it's much more difficult to navigate what is often difficult terrain emotionally. And so many of us in our culture, we're simply never really taught how to deal with these emotions in any kind of constructive way. I mean, the modeling all around us are ways to suppress, ways to distract ourselves from feeling, ways to pretend it's okay when it's not. And very little of it's perfectly okay to feel what you're feeling. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling that. We've all been taught the opposite. There is something wrong with us. Right? The question was asked by a gentleman. As a guy, we've been taught in our cultures, there is something wrong with us if we feel sad. Right? That's not okay. Boys aren't supposed to cry. That's a pretty clear message, that there is something wrong with us if we have certain kinds of emotions. And so we wind up relying on substances and largely food, and so it becomes very difficult to give those things up. But it goes much deeper than that. Many people at heart, deep down, really don't feel worthy. They don't believe that they deserve to feel and function as well as possible. And so people who feel unworthy will continue making choices that keep them where they are, because it's where they believe they should be. And this happens all over the place. This happens with income. People earn what they believe they're worth. Okay, so people that wind up, finding they've got a glass ceiling that doesn't really exist, there's nothing really preventing them from earning more, they're often doing it themselves. We're keeping ourselves where we believe we should be. Okay, and so this happens very much with diet and other issues around health as well. One way to say this is that there is a reason that we create everything we create. I believe we create all of it. And there's a reason that we create what we create. So someone who's created not being well, which to some extent has been every one of us at some point in our lives, right? I was there in a big way from the age of 23 to 26. And then I got beyond that. But anytime we're creating something like that that's really not in our own best interests, well, the truth is that in some way it is or seems to be in our best interest. It's serving us in some way. If it wasn't, we would be manifesting something different. Okay? So this is also a significant part for many people, why people continue to sabotage themselves and make poor choices. In fact, one way to think about this, it occurs to me that if we truly love ourselves, wouldn't we only make choices that were in our own best interest? Wouldn't we want to be taking the best care of ourselves? But who does that? No one I know that consistently makes perfect choices. I don't. I mean, for me, it's often staying up too late and not getting enough sleep. You know, it's something. I'm undermining my own success in some way. And that's often related to what's going on deep down inside for us emotionally. Okay? There's another piece, which is, I mean, the emotional piece is a huge piece, and one we've already spent probably a full hour talking about, and we could do several more hours talking about. We will at some point over the next few weeks. But it's too much perhaps for this conversation. Just to understand there are lots of things going on emotionally that have us stuck in various ways and making choices that aren't necessarily in our own best interests. But there's also physical components that people often don't think about. So one of them is that when we are feeling and functioning great, we tend to get messages to make choices that have us continue to feel and function very, very well. But the flip side of that is that when we're not feeling and functioning so well, we tend to make poor choices. So making sure that you're getting enough sleep on a consistent basis, making sure that you're getting enough and not too much exercise and activity, enough but not too much sunlight, making sure that you're meeting all of your body's physical needs, physiological needs, as well as your emotional needs, as well as you can. Because again, emotionally too, again, if you're not finding some constructive way to deal with emotions, you're going to wind up going back to using food. But if you're underslept, if you're tired, it's much easier to fall back into those old patterns when we're less vibrant. So this is why I've always said, I teach 7 keys to optimal health, and every one of them is equally important. And if you think you can just eat an optimal diet and don't have to worry about the rest, you're mistaken. It's not going to work. It never does. To create the highest level of health, you need to pay attention to all of them. And what I find is that simply to maintain an optimal diet, you really need to be paying attention to all the rest of these things. So I think these are some of the most basic reasons why people consistently fail. Now, there are other reasons too, and some of them are that they simply don't know what to do. They've got mis or disinformation. And so they make choices that they may think are optimal that are actually undermining their health in some way. And it may be very difficult to maintain doing that, right? But you guys have a significant advantage. That is, you guys that are here with me. You guys watching this, I don't know what you've been doing, but the people here with me are all either fasting right now or have already fasted. And that means you've got a significant advantage because you've eliminated most of the toxins, the gross level toxins in your body that create physical addictions. Physical addictions occur when we have this poison in the body. So when you get most of it out of your system, those physical addictions are largely eliminated. Whereas, if you're watching this and you haven't been through a 3, 4 or more week water-only fast and done it properly, chances are good you haven't eliminated all this stuff from your system. So it's going to be very difficult to give up bread, sugar, protein, concentrated proteins, if the stuff is still in your system. Once it's out of your system, giving it up is relatively easy. Your body doesn't really want it. But until it's out of your system, you're going to get this call to consume this stuff, just as happens with anybody who's addicted to anything, whether it's alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, cocaine, heroin. or anything else, the things that we don't think of as being toxic and addictive, and which can actually be more toxic and addictive in some ways than the other stuff, it can be really challenging until the stuff's out of your body. So I think those are the primary reasons. Any questions? Does this make sense to you guys?
Can you remind us your 7 keys to health?
Sure, the 7 keys that we need to take to meet in order to function at the highest level. Environment, which means pure air and water. And that encompasses all kinds of things. Sunlight, rest and sleep, exercise and activity, optimal diet, cleansing the body, and emotional poise. Those are the 7 keys. So I think that was 7. If not, those are the 6 keys. I think those are the 7 keys. Any other questions?
Can you expand on emotional poise?
Yeah. Emotional poise is, and I've got several videos on the subject, but emotional poise is simply finding a way, creating a way to be in the world emotionally where we're not upset by everything that happens. Because as the bumper sticker says, in life, sometimes stuff happens, right? So it's not about what happens or doesn't happen. I mean, people often blame their emotional balance on, well, stuff happened to me. Stuff happens to everybody. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do we deal with it? And do we find the strength to maintain equilibrium? And the tools, do we have the tools to maintain equilibrium in the face of whatever's going on? So it's being balanced and ready and able to respond in a constructive way no matter what happens. For me, that's what emotional poise is. Any other questions? Well, I hope that's been useful to you, and I'll see you next time.